Everybody, and welcome to another episode, if you will, of Derek's Mind. I am Derek Miller. I am your host slash orator today. And what I want to touch base on this beautiful Sunday morning as the sun's coming up, and I look around at how beautiful this morning is I want to talk about the cost of home ownership and the expense of renting right now and how that's presenting a problem for folks. So what we want to talk about is, what do you do right now if rent is just too expensive, or you end up in some tiny crappy little apartment trying to raise a family, and so that doesn't really feel like much of an option, and home ownership is clearly not an option. And we'll touch base on why those two things are probably as expensive as they are and what we see coming. But what people really want to know is, what do I do? I understand it's too expensive to rent. I know I can't afford to buy a house. Thanks for telling me what I already know, Derek. But what do I do about it? Well, let's talk about it. And then we'll talk a little bit about why those things are expensive. In the end, if it's something that you're interested in, you can stick around and listen. If not, let's talk about what you can do right now if you cannot afford to buy a home and rent is just extremely expensive, and what you're getting for your rental dollar right now nationwide is garbage. And it is. You might have a few little pockets here and there, and so if somebody wants to shout out, "Hey, I live in da da da," and it's not bad, I know that there's pockets, but by and large, right now, your rental dollar is garbage. I mean, I remember there's a movie I love with Kevin Bacon. I love '80s movies called "She's Having a Baby." And the wife's talking to Kevin Bacon, and she says, and I quote, "Your mother said it's amazing how far your rental or your home dollar doesn't go nowadays," commenting on the fact that homes were expensive in the '80s. And as we look now and you use a multiple of income, obviously they were very, very inexpensive until compared to now. But she was just mocking how expensive it was. And right now, even rentals are like that. All right, let's talk about what we do. So we're going to cover three different options that people are taking. I'm going to talk about the pros and cons. Most of these I've done, by the way, so I can talk about these pros and cons from my point of view and from a general point of view, because I do live in this country. And the reason I do Derek's Mind, the reason I talk about finance, the reason I talk about these things going on is I'm a talker and I enjoy it. So I obviously talk to a lot of people as well. So let's talk about it. So the first thing you can do, we'll talk about the pros and cons after. The first thing you can do is you can try to move to a less expensive area. Okay, that's one thing that you can try to do. The second thing you can do is obviously try to downsize, right? You can try to go smaller. And there's a bunch of guys out there right now that'll tell you, like, just stop eating avocado toast. That's where your problem lies. The fact that your bills are $3,000 more a month than your income is not an income issue. You need to stop eating avocado toast, and you absolutely need to stop getting that coffee. Why should you enjoy a delicious coffee when those born into a much easier financial life, they get to enjoy it, but you stay strapped, keep your feet on the ground? And that's not a knock on anybody who has it better, by the way. If you know me, you know I don't do that. It's just that when these people talk, they don't realize that when you come from even it doesn't matter right now. I don't even know that there is a such thing as much of a middle class anymore. And I know we've been saying that for generations. So I have a funny feeling that it's always been this way. I'm sure that if I were guessing, it has been. But it doesn't feel like there's much of one anymore. And if you're born even in the middle class, why should you not get to enjoy the luxuries that life has to offer, right? So anyway, let's not go off on a tangent there, which I tend to do, by the way. So one, we can move somewhere less expensive. Two, we can downsize. And three, and this is something that I don't think a lot of people have explored very much. There's a new housing market out there, folks, and I personally take advantage of this. This is what I personally do. So you're going to get a lot more pros out of me than you are going to get cons out of me. And that is Airbnbs. The Airbnb market exploded during COVID. And What happened from that was a lot of people bought these Airbnbs, and they became dependent on that short-term rental income, which was really, when you're spending $100 a night on some condo, that's $3,000 a month. That probably is one of the reasons there was a driver in the long-term rental market, the push in price up. There's others, but that was probably one of them, and probably quite a big one. And now that they can't do that anymore, now that owners, they being the owners of Airbnbs, can't do that anymore, you're seeing a collapsing Airbnb market nationwide. But those that bought Airbnbs realizing that that was a peak time are now also realizing that they have to go into a long-term rental situation, and they are doing longer-term rentals with their Airbnbs. So let's talk about the pros and cons. I can tell you that I choose number 3. That's what my family and I do, and I'm going to talk a bit about that. But let's talk about some other things I've done. How about going to a less expensive area, right? Let's talk about what that's like. What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, oftentimes when you go to a less expensive area, if there is a such thing as a less expensive area, which I'm going to touch base on as well. We were in LA in 2020 and 2021, and it wasn't just the COVID restrictions that drove us to leave and move to the Keys in Florida. And as any of you that follow me, you'll see plenty of posts from the Keys in Florida. And yes, we lived there for 2 years. The other thing that drove us there was this promise of a different level of freedom. In Florida, they were free. I did not find either of those things to be true. I did not find Florida to be less expensive, and I certainly did not find it to be more free, which is why I am back in California now. What I found when I got to Florida was prices were just as elevated. I was in Key Largo, so I was south of Miami. It's not Key West, everyone who's trying to act like, oh, you go live in a resort town, and of course it's going to be more expensive. No, it wasn't a resort town. Key Largo is not a resort town. It's a fishing town. And it's just south of the Everglades, which is a place called Homestead, which is primarily farming, right? So it was isolated, I would say, to a degree. It wasn't a very active place, which went against everything I also had read. So when you're thinking about relocating, especially if it comes down to the cost of living, please do me a favor. Don't just go there because of what you read, because I can tell you that what we read and what we got were two totally different things. It was not a very active lifestyle. We personally love the sun. So I know the Florida heat is hard on a lot of people. It certainly was not hard on us. We walked 3 to 4 miles a day. My wife and I and my son. My daughter joins us here and there, but she's not walking with us every day. She has, schoolwork to do and different things, so she has to do that. But what we found there was it wasn't less expensive. It's less expensive. There's places that were less expensive that were garbage dumps. So where we were in California, if we wanted to go less expensive, we could just go into a garbage dump. When we got to the Keys, if we wanted to go less expensive, we actually had a real estate agent take us to a trailer park in Key Largo and pitch us on the fact that a $600,000 trailer in a trailer park was a good buy. And they believed this. So when you're talking about LA and you're reading all this stuff, and I assure you that it was no different for us there. No different whatsoever. The cost of food was no different. There were benefits to Florida that I didn't have in California. For one was the DMV. In Florida, the DMV is boom, 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 boom. No problem. You're still a person. Everything isn't run by this technological bureaucratic system that just is like weighing on you and crushing you. When you go in and they want to make sure you're a resident, you show them your lease on a phone. They go, oh, okay, good. And punch in the little keys. And I mean, I have my license in 10 minutes. I've been in California now for 6 months. I've been to the DMV 3 times. And each time I go, there's some new obstacle as to why I can't get my plates and why I can't get my driver's license done. And, oh, you didn't print this. You didn't print that. We need this. It's like, aren't we just people? I'm showing you a lease and I'm showing. So I don't want to go down the road of the DMV, but there's a bureaucratic tech system in California that is a giant pain. There is nothing easy about it. And in Florida, that stuff was all really easy. Okay. But also, I would tell you that you have the things to watch when you're going to relocate too, the healthcare system. I can tell you that in Florida, their healthcare is not good. We couldn't find a dentist for our children in the Keys. Not a single dentist would take them. My daughter was having a toothache so bad that she was crying. So we're calling. We must have called 20 dentists. None. We don't have a place for her. We don't have a spot. We can't do this. We can't do that. Everything was a no. Do you know what we finally did? We had to go to a dentist that gets offered through the school, that you go into a like an RV. So it's like a mobile dentist. Thankfully, they were amazing and it was wonderful. But I have to tell you that I would have never expected that ever in my life, that I couldn't get decent health care, that I couldn't get to a doctor. My poor little girl, my baby girl, my pit bull, she passed away. We couldn't get to a vet until my wife finally called and said, "You don't understand. She is in pain. We have to see someone," and they squoze us in, which thank goodness that they did. She only had 3 more days to live. She was a beautiful angel who put up with a lot of pain, and we never even knew it, because that's how sweet she was. She was such an amazing dog, my little Piper. I loved her. But she passed away. We couldn't get to a vet. Healthcare is something to take note of. Education. Look, education in this country, regardless of where you live, it's going to be different everywhere. The news likes to pump up certain topics, but I'll tell you that most of that isn't true. From my experience, I have not found most of that to be true, but there's definitely, education is something huge. You want to make sure that where you're going has some level of like education that you're used to. Also, when they talk about somewhere being cheaper, make sure you're not looking at the median in a place that has wealth disparity like you're in Mumbai in India, where the richest, biggest house in the world is, and just underneath him is a slum. Make sure you're not in a place that has wealth disparity of that degree. A lot of people talk about California, but I can tell you that the wealth disparity in California there is a disparity. There's always a disparity, but it was far smaller than it was in Florida. In Florida, there are just the have everythings and then the have absolutely nothings. From my experience, that's what I experienced. So I saved no money. And aside from like the DMV and some of the government type stuff, like the bureaucratic, the fact that the bureaucratic stuff is smaller, aside from, that was it. That was the benefit of Florida for me personally. You can talk about people and, well, people believe this and people believe that. You'll find people that believe everything everywhere you go. There's no place that people only believe this and people only believe that. And what I found to be true is most people are in the middle anyway. You might be in the middle leaning a little right. You might be in the middle leaning a little left. But I've lived all over this country, and I can tell you that's what I see. That's all I ever see. I never see what they're talking about on the news. Never. They're showing this giant, oh, look at all these people. It's like, I assure you that 5 or 10,000 people looks like a lot on a news station when you're talking about some nowhere place in North Carolina, or some nowhere place in Alabama, or some nowhere place in Oregon. But 10,000, 20,000 people, when it comes to the population of the U.S., is nothing. That's a tiny, tiny group of screamers. And screamers get the most attention because they're screaming. So for me personally, relocation, what are the pros and cons? Pros, adventure. What do we get out of going to Florida? We got to take our daughter and have her experience the Everglades. She could throw a rock from the Gulf to the Atlantic. There's not a lot of places like that. The crystal clear water, amazing. And all over Florida, I have to tell you, there's a place called Crystal River. It's just inland from Tampa, so just east of Tampa. Oh, is it beautiful there? So many beautiful places. Oh, so many nice people. So many nice people. You know, they're living a little different in the sense that a lot of that is what you would call very rural. And I don't think a lot of people know that, but most of Florida feels very rural. So you have a lot of space, which is really nice. But I have to tell you, the kindness that we met with there, that we felt there, was wonderful. They were different than us, right? I don't know what they said when we turned around. but we had a good time there. We really did. Adventure is huge for me, and I have 2 children. My daughter, when we went, she's now 10, so she was 8, 7. She was about 7 years old when we went, and my son was brand new. He wasn't even 1 yet, and that was a great time. We had a good time. But as far as relocation goes, to save money, if you asked me, bad idea. I don't have my family's spread out. I have 2 brothers, and I have 3 brothers, and we're all spread out all over the country. So where I live really doesn't matter. But yeah, I would just say no. For the relocation, to save money on housing, It's a big no-no for me. Number two, downsizing. Well, downsizing has its place if you find yourself in a if you're living in 3,000 square feet with two children. Trust me when I tell you, unless you live in an area with terrible weather, you are living far too large. And the reason I say unless you live in an area with terrible weather is because I've lived in areas with terrible weather, and your home becomes your kingdom. You're not going outside very much. You're not doing very much. I don't choose to live in those places. I don't enjoy them. I don't particularly enjoy the cold. Although when we came back to California, we did spend like 4 or 5 months up in Big Bear, California, in the snow because my daughter had never lived in the snow. But I'm glad that we had that adventure. I'm also very glad that it's over. I'm not a cold weather person. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I left that weather for a reason. I don't enjoy it. It's not something I'm into. But back to the downsizing. So downsizing, I did that too. Went down to a 2-bedroom apartment. It was less expensive, but the living standard was not something I enjoyed, nor would I choose to ever do again. I did not find that pleasurable at all. You're on top of each other. Even if you're going to say, well, we're going to spend most of our time outside. You're right, you are. But your kids are going to have homework. Your kids need to wind down at the end of the night. Your pets are in there with you. And it's just, for me, getting into an 800 square foot. I mean, for us, 1,100 square foot is fine. Like 1,100 square foot, we're doing quite well. Now, my son still sleeps with us most of the time. So does my daughter, as a matter of fact. But my son does still sleep with us. He doesn't really need his own room. He's kind of always with us or with his sister. And so there is going to come a point where obviously he's going to need his own space. His sister's 10 and he's 3. His sister's going to go through puberty, which may have already started. I can't tell. But we're definitely getting some of that teenager vibe going here. And I just, the downsizing is not anything I would suggest to anybody. For me, what are the benefits of downsizing? I can only give you one. It's cheaper. When you lose square footage, you lose costs. But I'm going to tell you, I wouldn't do that either. I would not relocate, and I would not downsize. And the reason I wouldn't do those things are what I just talked about now. I don't see the benefit in them. Not purely for price, not purely for cost. Now, Airbnbs, this is an interesting subject. What we find right now is that these people own these Airbnbs. They can't do the short-term rental anymore, but they purchase the home. And a lot of them are doing long-term rentals. And let me tell you something. I'm in California. I'm on a golf course right now. Now I can let me give you, for those of you that aren't from California, kind of the LA area, or really anywhere in California, to be perfectly honest with you, let me give you just an idea of where rent is. And I already know that rent is very similar where you live. If you live anywhere near a city that's doing anything, I already know that you're paying these same prices. So I don't want to hear from anybody in the peanut gallery that says, I pay $12.50. Well, if you're in Punxsutawney, I know that. I get it. And I'm not knocking Punxsutawney, by the way. And I only use that because I'm from Pennsylvania. And that's where the groundhog comes out and looks at his shadow. So Punxsutawney might actually be very expensive. I have no idea. But if you're from some small place paying $1,250 a month, I get it. You're in some mountain by some lake, in a small town, I get it. Which actually that could probably be a fourth way to downsize, but fourth way to try to reduce. But again, that's relocation. That fits in with number one. Back to the point. Airbnbs. Where I'm at now, I would say to get a 3-bedroom house, not big, 1,600 square foot, you're looking at $4,000 to $5,000 a month. That's just what it is. This is not glamorous living I'm talking about, folks. This is just a single story house at 1,600 square foot. $4,000 to $5,000 a month. Now, I realize some of you out there are going to tell me the stories of the rent in your area, and most of you are going to be homeowners, so you don't actually know the rent in your area. But for you renters out there, I know that you know, right? Why am I not buying a home right now? Well, that's a subject for another live, but I would not buy a home right now, and I promise you I would never buy a home right now. And we'll talk a little bit about why home ownership is so expensive, why rental is so expensive, where Airbnb falls in there, and what we can probably expect moving forward here in a minute. Let me see. What time am I at here? I am at 20 minutes. So I'm only going to go on for about 9 more minutes. So Airbnb, 4,000 to 5,000 right now where I'm at. Now you still have to pay all the bills for that, right? You have to pay all your bills. You're not going to pay HOA or anything, but you know what I'm talking about: gas, electric, water, all these things. You're going to pay for all that. There's no there in 4,000 to 5,000. Maybe some have a pool, some don't, but you're then going to pay the water bill for that, which is probably $1,000 a month. So you have a lot of expenses on top of your rent. Everybody knows that rents. My Airbnb right now is going to average me $2,800 a month. I have a pool. I have every amenity in the house you can imagine. Like, for example, I have the Nespresso espresso maker. I have a pod coffee maker. I have a coffee pot. I have a kitchen that has everything in it. I have a laundry room back here. It's its own separate room with its ironing board and irons and everything you need. Because when you come in to an Airbnb, you don't even have to do anything. You don't have to move in dishes or silverware or anything. Now, the idea that it's not a move, I want to dispel that immediately. It is a move, and it's a real move. When you move into an Airbnb, it's a real move because you're going to have to bring a lot of clothes with you. And if you're going to stay somewhere for a year, I don't care who you are, you're going to want some of your creature comforts. But at the same time, what are you getting in the house? I mean, this house is brand new remodeled. We're the first person to live in it. We're the first person to live here. We have beautiful rose bushes that lie in the back next to the golf course. So we have roses on our table every single day. Every single day. Airbnbs tend to be very centrally located. So just behind me is a shopping area that has everything you can imagine. All the restaurants, all your groceries, everything you can imagine is 5-minute walk that away. I have a golf course that I live on. I'm on hole 2. Inside my pantry here, or inside the laundry room here, there's a pitcher and a putter and 6 balls. I go out and I hit balls on a golf course every evening because I want to. And that cost me $2,800 all in. So the reason that I'm getting these prices is because the Airbnb market is so soft. So I don't want to say that I'm taking advantage of anything, because then you'd have to say, well, the people that own the Airbnb got to take advantage of people in 2020. They weren't taking advantage. There was a large demand. There was a small supply. So they were able to charge more. Right now, there's a huge supply and there's a very small demand. So I get to take advantage. So that's what my family and I have chose to do. All right. And then, hold on, I got something better. And then Airbnb messed up. They allowed someone to cancel on us. We were going into a 4-month move. They allowed someone to cancel on us. So they had to refund us our money. But just so that we could book this place, they had to give us a credit on our account. And they gave us a credit that was $600 more than the cost of this place. So we got our money back. We got a month's free rent, and we got $600 off another month's rent. So in a 6-month rental that's going to cost me $2,800, I also got another $3,500 credit, because Airbnb messed up. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, and this is the first time it's happened to me. But right now, if it were me, if someone asked me, Derek, what would you do? Where would you go? I would go into longer-term Airbnbs. There's plenty of them doing it. They have beautiful amenities. They have everything you can ask for. I mean, the Nespresso machine itself is a few $100s. We have blenders and pots and pans. We have gimmicks. We have rice makers, those rice makers, air fryers, stuff I don't use. Like, no, I don't buy those. I consider that stuff luxury stuff. I don't buy it. I got a cupboard full of it. I get everything you can imagine here, all for $2,800, all in. What's that really in rent? I mean, when you start including bills and all that, now I do have to have a storage that costs me $228 a month. I do have to have that. So, that counts, right? So that's another $200 a month. But listen, $3,000 all in on a golf course with a pool in a 1,700 square foot house that's centrally located. Everything, you can't beat it. All right, real quickly, why are mortgages so expensive? Well, there's 2 reasons. One, the Federal Reserve flooded the U.S. market with U.S. currency in 2021. They increased the amount of currency in the U.S. market by 50%, just about 50%. What does that do when you push a bunch of money into a market? Well, what happens if I push a bunch of money into a housing neighborhood? What happens if I push a bunch of money into the stock market? Prices rise. It's called inflation. It was intentional. They knew exactly what they were doing. And here we are dealing with the inflation now. That is why prices are up. What is another reason? Well, to reel that inflation back in, you have to jack up interest rates. So right now, interest rates are about double what they were a year ago, a year and a half ago. So not only did your house go from 250,000 to 400,000, then they took interest rates from 3.5 and they pushed them to 7. So you have a roughly a 40% increase in the cost of a house, and then you have double the cost of interest, which almost doubles the cost of your house. So right now, what you used to pay $1,500 for is running you about $3,300. Nice work. That makes a lot of sense. Just bravo. Okay, that makes no sense. But the reason that I would never buy a house right now, even if I could afford it, is because anything that goes parabolic up in that in that direction has to come down in the same manner, and typically much quicker once it takes off. There's game playing that goes on, and they'll try to stretch this out. Corporate America is buying every home in business because they didn't get their interest rates doubled. They borrow 1%, and they get to compete with you on an even playing field. Thanks, Supreme Court. Corporations are people, so they get to compete with people. So I get to go to market with Apple and BlackRock and Blackstone and Citadel and try to compete with them on the housing market. Brilliant. Why are rentals so high? Rentals are so high for a couple of reasons. Because home ownership and rental is a competitive market. They're going to stay competitive. Also, the Air BnB situation. Do rents come down? Historically, folks, I have to warn you that rentals do not traditionally come down. Even when home prices plummet, rentals tend to stay pretty kind of on a slope. They go up. They might stall a little bit, but they don't tend to go down. So long-term rentals do not tend to go down. Airbnbs, that's your spot. Airbnbs are less expensive because there is a large supply. There is a very low demand. The only thing that you have to realize when you're going into an Airbnb is there's going to be hangups. You need to pay attention. In our last one, the sliding glass door on the second floor, the lock was broken. I had to fix it. My son, if I didn't know better, he could have pulled it open and fallen right off the deck. He was only 2 years old. But I do know better, so I check for safety first. The other thing, we've walked into Airbnbs. That last Airbnb was covered with rodents when we got there. Luckily, we have cats, so the cats killed them. The other thing to be aware of is sometimes cleanliness. I have to tell you that we've gone into some that are beautifully clean and beautifully well kept, and some that are terrible. The last one was terrible. I mean, it was an awful. The electric didn't work. The stove broke and was deemed unusable and dangerous, and the guy basically told me too bad. But I've reported him to San Bernardino County, and that's the beauty of renting or owning. I guess renting primarily. If someone is an abusive landlord, go after him, get him. I'm going to. So anyway, that is my story on what to do. So you can, right? If buying a home is too expensive, buying a home is too expensive and rent's too expensive, you can go into the Airbnb, which I personally think is the best idea. You can relocate. You can downsize. Unless you're downsizing from a mansion. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into my live. If you choose to support me, please, there's a QR code up there in the top left-hand corner. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Any of you out there struggling with any mental health issues, listen to me. Stay positive. Things will be okay. I know I have been down to $0. I have a family of 4. I know what it's like to be in those tenuous situations. Just try to keep your mind open. Just try to stay positive. Remember that every day is a gift. Try to find joy. Every day is a gift is hokey, but try to find joy. Trust me, it's better than not trying to find joy. And when you can't find joy, go sit in a room, cry for about 2 days, and hopefully you emerge a better, happier man, woman, child, person, whoever you are. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great Sunday. And I look forward to talking with you again tomorrow. Although I think I'm going to do a couple more lives today.